welcome back to my channel. My name is Carly Stevens. I'm the author of the young adult fantasy Firian Rising, and this is English Nerd. So I know that I've been coming out with these videos more often. If you've been around my channel for a while, I apologize for the sudden inundation of all of these Tale of Two Cities videos, but because of the distance learning situation that has recently come about, I do need to get these videos out more quickly for my own students as well as students in other schools. So I'll continue to make videos about other things besides the Tale of Two Cities as I'm doing this series, have no fear, but just that's what's going on. That's why I suddenly have a bunch of these. So today we're talking about book 2. I was about to say episode. Oh my goodness. Book 2, chapter 6, Hundreds of People. So I feel like this is a decent place to show you a map of where all these things are happening. At the very beginning of the chapter, we have a description of where Dr. and Lucie Manette live, and then Mr. Lorry goes to visit. So if you take a look at this map, you'll see London. The river there is the Thames, and I'm going to zero in on this section in particular because it's where most of the action happens in the story. So if we get closer, then you can see a few important locations. Off to the left there is Soho Square, and that is where the Manettes live. And then the circled item on the right is the Temple Bar, and that is where Carton and Stryver have their quarters as well, which I talked about in the last video. So that's pretty cool. Tellson's Bank is described as being pretty close to Temple Bar, just a little bit north, closer to Fleet Street, where I hear there are demon barbers. But anyway, let's dive in. So it's about 4 months after the trial of Charles Darnay, where he gets acquitted of treason because Carton looks exactly like him. Carton essentially saves his life, but also kind of hates Darnay. But this chapter is not so much about him as it is about the Manettes. So Lorry goes to visit them, and he first encounters Miss Pross. Now, we've seen Miss Pross before. She was in the preparation chapter of book 1 after Lorry tells Lucie that her father has been found alive. And there's the wild red woman who runs in and then just Iron Man's Mr. Lorry against the wall with one hand. That is Miss Pross. So Lorry and Pross have since become friends, which I think is super cute. It's an unlikely friendship, and I just really like those. Mr. Lorry is really uptight and businesslike, and Miss Pross is a self-proclaimed servant of Lucie who's also just very brusque and a bit crazy, but I think she's probably the most criminally underrated character in this entire story. So the reason that this chapter is called Hundreds of People is that Miss Pross says that she's very much put out, and when Lorry asks why, Miss Pross responds, "I do not want dozens of people who are not at all worthy of Ladybird to come here looking after her." So Ladybird is her name for Lucie, of course. And so Mr. Lorry asks, do dozens come for that purpose? Like, how many people are courting Lucie? It turns out, like, everybody in London, there have to be other ladies somewhere, but anyway, Lucie is the best, I guess. And then Miss Pross responds, hundreds come. So hundreds of people, it's kind of the tongue-in-cheek title of describing the number of people who are coming to call upon Lucie. Turns out that it's only 2 people who come to call upon Lucie here as suitors, sort of, but just 2. So before we move on from Miss Pross, we get a good glimpse into the type of character that she is here, and her character ends up being a lot more important than this chapter would initially suggest. If you've read the book, then you know, but if you've only read up to this chapter, then I want to highlight how important she is. So, man, I almost did that thing again where I say, and then on page, whatever. Gosh, English teacher habits die hard. So, a couple pages after what I just read, it says, Mr. Lorry knew Miss Pross to be very jealous, but he also knew her by this time to be, beneath the surface of her eccentricity, one of those unselfish creatures, found only among women, who will, for pure love and admiration, bind themselves willing slaves, to youth when they have lost it, to beauty that they never had, to accomplishments that they were never fortunate enough to gain, to bright hopes that never shone upon their own somber lives. So Mr. Laurie really respects Miss Pross for this characteristic, her selflessness, and that is, again, a super important point. She binds herself this willing slave to Lucie. Dickens does say these unselfish creatures are only found among women. Dickens is known for his awesome characters, but he did have this weakness for creating a certain type of like perfect woman, like Lucie, who's kind of modeled after his crush, I guess, in real life, Ellen Ternan. But sometimes he'll create these pedestal ladies. The men are not so much like that. But anyway, Miss Pross, she is selfless, and if you were unclear about how selfless she is, Miss Pross says, okay, we're still talking about Lucie and how nobody deserves her. There never was, she says, nor will be, but one man worthy of Ladybird, and that was my brother Solomon, if he hadn't made a mistake in life. Like, he would be worthy of her if he were just, a better person. Which is shocking when you find out about Solomon Pross. Solomon, her brother, took everything she had and abandoned her completely. I mean, most people would not forgive somebody for doing something like that, but clearly Miss Pross has and would be willing to accept him back into her life because she regards this as a mistake. So she's selfless and she's forgiving. Solomon Pross is another name to remember. All right, so carrying on, the last thing that they talk about is how Dr. Manette, who is doing much, much better, I'm so glad you asked, is, he's taking on patients and he's living a much more normal life than he had been before because Lucie was successful in recalling him to life after he was released from prison. But he does keep his shoemaking tools with him. And Laurie and Pross are both a little bit unsure why that might be, but they speculate, why would he keep his shoemaking tools there? It seems pretty clear that he's afraid of a relapse back to that senseless state that we found him in the shoemaker chapter. And if he were to go back there, his only comfort while he was in prison was the ability to take his mind off of his troubles by focusing on these shoes. So it's like Linus's security blanket. He just carries it around. Doesn't always use it, but he feels like he would be adrift without it. So just another important detail to notice. Okay, after this, then the little group of them, Pross and Laurie and Dr. and Lucie Manette, go out and have a nice picnic under the plane tree. And Charles Darnay joins them, which shouldn't surprise anybody because Lucie and Darnay were making googly eyes at each other at the trial the entire time. 4 months have passed, and he is now a friend of the family, if you will. I like that Dickens, when he describes Darnay coming, says this: still, the hundreds of people did not present themselves that Pross talked about. Mr. Darnay presented himself while they were sitting under the plane tree, but he was only one. So we just have the one suitor, right? Charles Darnay. And Darnay is talking with the group, and I feel like he's a decent guy, but he has a really stupid moment here. I'm just going to call it what it is. It's really dumb. He is talking to Dr. Manette, and he's like, do you know much about, have you seen much of the Tower, is the question that he has. The Tower he's referring to is the Tower of London, which you have hopefully heard of, but if not, it was used for many years as a dungeon, a really terrible prison for people who went against the crown, for instance. Now, if you have somebody, you're trying to court somebody, right? And that person's parent has experienced extreme traumatic stress over an episode. You probably shouldn't bring up anything that would recall that topic. I'm just going to leave that there. Darnay does. And Dr. Manette takes it in stride. He's like, oh yeah, no, I've seen it. It's an interesting location to see. And then Darnay tells this interesting story. He says that there was, he heard this story one time about how a prisoner had etched some letters into the wall. People thought it was D-I-C, but then it turned out it was D-I-G. And when people dug in there, under that stone, then they found the remnants of some writing, although it was all, I think, burned and destroyed. But the prisoner had left something there and hidden it from the jailer. Isn't that fascinating? And immediately, Dr. Manette just freaks out. I mean, he has a mini relapse. Lucie goes, "Oh my gosh, are you ill? Are you going to be okay?" Because something in the story triggered Dr. Manette. So again, some pretty heavy foreshadowing there of things that we don't know for sure about Dr. Manette, but we've had a few of those moments where this fear has come upon him with something to do with Darnay. So right after that, everybody recovers. Darnay hopefully feels bad about being dumb. And then Mr. Carton lounges in, but he made only 2. So we get 2 suitors total. That is Darnay and Carton. Carton doesn't really announce himself as a suitor exactly. He just kind of hangs out there. According to this actual story, Carton doesn't come until the picnic is over, but one of my favorite Fizz illustrations and one of the most popular is Under the Plane Tree, which is this one. And it shows everybody having a nice picnic, and again, Carton lounging in the shadows, looking just like Darnay, but really not participating in what's going on. The best illustration of this, I think, when Carton comes in is just this sentence, a bunch of semicolons, I love it. Lucie sat by her father. Darnay sat beside her. Carton leaned against a window. It's like everybody has a buddy except for Carton. Of course Lucie's sitting by her father. Of course Darnay is sitting by Lucie. And then Carton is over here. He just has the window for company. Sad day. And then we finally just get a little bit of foreshadowing that there are going to be groups of people, fast, fierce, and furious, footsteps echoing into their lives because they live in this very echoey place. So when the storm comes in, it sounds like all these footsteps on the stairs, and it leaves on that kind of ominous note. But anyway, that is it for chapter 6. If you have any questions or comments, please let me know down below. Otherwise, I will see you soon. Bye.